Welcome everyone to Converge. I'm super excited about this one today. You know that on this show we've often discussed how finance teams haven't always benefited from the same level of software innovation that other parts of a company like sales and marketing have. So I'm super pumped to see a handful of different startups out there these days at the forefront of bringing new technologies to market for CFOs and their teams. And in particular, the way in which they're leveraging AI is something I wanted to get someone in here to talk about. So I'm excited to be sitting with Siqi Chen today, who's the founder and CEO of Runway, and he's here to tell us a little bit about his company and speak a bit more broadly about the incredible AI opportunities ahead in business finance, because this is where I think he really thinks about this area a lot. He's impressed me with his future outlook. So Siqi, without further ado, thanks for being here and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Alex. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, man. You've told your background story so many times on other shows, so I don't want to, dig too deep back into it. Even though it's an amazing story, I want to jump in and just start talking about some of the cool stuff on the menu for today. So, just to set the stage a little bit for the problem that you all are solving for at Runway. On your company's LinkedIn page, you say that business financials got stuck in the 15th century and haven't changed in over half a millennium. So why did that happen while the rest of the world, evolved? Why did business finance stay in the Stone Age?
I think it's just a really hard problem to solve, right? But, the last big revolution in finance was the spreadsheet. And before that, it was double entry accounting. But the world and the experience of work has moved past that, particularly with knowledge work, working with a large group of people. People need to understand the context in which they work, and making this accessible to people is a difficult problem. I think there's a lot of legacy things that we just take for granted in terms of how finance should work and what the terms are and how understandable it should be. And I think it's high time. It's probably past time that we try to solve this problem.
Couldn't agree more. So putting on our tinfoil hats a little bit, you have said that there was a vast financial conspiracy that has trapped people in this cycle of needing to pay others to basically use clunky, unintuitive, and outdated software to manage our financial lives. And that applies for individuals and businesses. And whole industries have been created out of this as a result. Is that part of the reason we've been stuck in the Stone Age, in your view? And what gives you hope that we'll get past that conspiracy, if it's such a thing?
That is a great question. And this is like my personal conspiracy theory. But this is more this is more appropriate for enterprise software in general. And so enterprise software is notoriously annoying to use. No one likes using it. And, I think the world is run by incentives. And so I've done a lot of thinking about this. Like, why are people spending so much money on software that nobody likes using and is barely used? And one of the reasons is because the people buying the software aren't the same people using it. And so you end up optimizing for different things. Like, does it check all the bullets on the feature grid, right? And can I take out the decision maker to nice dinners to get them to sign a contract? But because that's what the incentives were, and we end up with these products that no one likes to use, we end up with a situation where nobody wants to use this, but the people whose job it is to use it get really good at using it. And so now we have large groups of people who are paid to use software that no one else is willing to use. And now you have a different set of incentives, and you keep the vast financial conspiracy going. That is my own personal theory on some of the dynamics at play. And what's changing is people's expectations around user experience has shifted. We have amazing products inside and outside of finance today. We have iPhones, which are amazing products. But also inside of work, we have things like Notion and Airtable and Figma. The modern generation of products has proven that you can build very powerful, useful software and make it a lot more accessible. And I think companies and leadership has gotten smarter as the new generation of founders and finance leaders has come into their own, and they're demanding software that actually get used, that actually solve problems in a real way, that brings clarity to their understanding of their business.
Yeah, very true. So I guess just given that, the conspiracy that's out there, the situation with needing to upgrade and update financial software to the modern day, that's where Runway came in and has shown its value proposition. Can you just give us a little bit of like background on what Runway is, just at a high level, and then I'll sort of continue on to the next question.
Yeah, there's many ways to describe Runway. Imagine what a Figma for finance looks like if you ever use Figma design tool, or a version of Notion does math. But basically, the thing that makes Runway different. So first of all, Runway is a financial planning platform. So you have a financial model that runs a business, and we make a really, really good version of that software that makes it possible for people inside and outside of finance to do a few things. The first thing is to get all of their data in automatically from all the data sources. So one of the more time-consuming things that happens is actualizing the model every month. So we integrate with 600 different things, whether it's your general ledger or HR systems, your data warehouse, even Google Sheets if you still want to use that, to keep your model up to date every month. So that's the first thing. The second thing that happens as a company scales is you have more people in your company. And the problem with a model is two things. One is the only person who understands the complexity of a spreadsheet model is one person made it in the first place. But two, even if you decide that you're going to sit everyone down and teach them how the model works, you still can't share the model if you want to give people the context of the business. Why can't you do that? Because you can't just hide one column and lock that one column down in a spreadsheet model, that column being salaries, right? And so you need to have really fine-grained control and collaboration tools to make it possible for you to share. And the third thing that happens is the business itself becomes more complex. You have new product segments, new customer segments, new geographies, and the model becomes highly dimensional really quickly. And Excel is inherently not really a dimensional modeling tool of any kind. And so all of the three reasons converge: the complexity of the complexity of the model, the time of keeping up to date, the need to collaborate with different people outside of finance, eventually results in enough pain that you need to switch to something different. And so what Runway is a really, really good version of that software that not only makes it easier for you to solve those problems as a finance person, but makes it possible for people outside of finance to actually understand what finance does and how the business works.
Nice, nice. So your mission at its core is to make business understandable and more accessible to, I think you say, everyone. So does the effort to innovate in this area of the CFO present some unique challenges? And what's it been like tackling those challenges as an early disruptor? And do you find that the proponents, or the participants rather, in that vast financial conspiracy theory that you have, do you find there's a fair amount of pushback on this mission, or perhaps downplaying the ability to be able to serve this use case in that same way that a spreadsheet has so reliably done in the past for many different companies? What is the main challenge you've run up against since the origin of the business and up until today? Are you still facing those hurdles, or are there new ones that have come up?
Yeah, there's been a ton of hurdles in building the product. But I think the surprising thing is I too came in thinking this is going to be a hard sell to sort of hard-boiled finance leaders who are into Excel a lot. And that actually hasn't been the case. And I think there's two reasons for this. One is they're experiencing real pain. Yeah, that exists, right? And the pains I mentioned, the amount of time it takes to keep up to date, handling all this complexity. And also, the finance leaders today, they understand the importance of getting other people to care about finance, right? The frustration of having people not understand what their role is, what makes them valuable, how are they strategically adding value to the company. All these things are like all problems that are very top of mind for every finance leader. And so we find that at a certain scale, when we get to 50 to 100 employees or so, they're looking for something to solve those pains. So it hasn't been as nearly as difficult as we've seen, as we would have expected. But the thing that has been challenging, probably the most challenging thing, is this observation is not new for Runway or for the industry. Anaplan, Adaptive has been talking about strategic connected planning for upwards of a decade or two, right? Lotus Improv, which is a dimensional modeling tool, was invented in the late 80s. And yet it's still a problem. And I find that our biggest challenge is getting people in front of the product. And I remember talking to a partner at an investment bank a few weeks back at a conference. And I just found myself saying the same words. We make this really easy to use, and we make it accessible, and we have some new innovations. And he nodded his head and said, yeah, that makes sense. This is a big problem. But then finally I said, you just have to come to our booth and see the demo. And after I showed him the product experience, he said verbatim, I'll never forget it. He said, I didn't know this is possible. And this is like seeing Google for the first time. And so the biggest challenge is, how do we get people to understand the proof of the pudding is in the eating? You have to actually see it, because everyone understands that the problems exist and it's important to solve. But no one's really solved it. And you have to do something pretty radically new to do so.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really liked what you said about the importance of making, finance not just more understandable and accessible, but tying people's employees' contributions to that financial bottom line impact. I struggle with that as a manager to, tie a direct reports contribution to what exactly that meant for the business, or it means for the business. And I think obviously that builds a sense of purpose that, nice words simply can't build. So I love the ethos behind that. I think it's really important, but I also see maybe potential issues there with too much transparency, and maybe some unintended misunderstanding from lack of context if there was broader access to financial documents. So how does Runway seek to find that perfect balance to help everyone on the team, as you say, act like owners in the company with the same context that business leaders would have, as you put it, but without negative unintended consequences?
Yeah. So 2 observations here. The first one is that there's a false trade-off between control and transparency. So the intuitive belief would be that, if you are more transparent, that means you have less control over the information. And actually the reverse is true. So, and this is something that Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook noticed really early. So I come from a consumer product background, and this is my first B2B company of any kind. So that's the lens in which I view a lot of these problems. But in the early days of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg observed that Facebook actually gave their users a lot more control, more than any other product, over who gets to see what. Is it public? Is it private? Is it just to friends? And as a result, people shared more on Facebook than they otherwise would have on some other platform. And so by giving people more control over visibility and privacy, people were a lot more comfortable sharing more because they felt like they were in control. And I think the same applies to business. Again, if you think about if you want to give people a bit more context over how the business works, and your only tool is a spreadsheet, you can't if you don't want people to see the salaries. That level of fine-grained control doesn't exist in that product. But imagine if you had a platform where you had incredibly fine-grained control over who gets to see what fine pieces of data. You can like hide a column, you can hide a row, you can hide a page, and that is reliable. Then you're willing to share a lot more because you know you have the control over it. So more control actually enables more sharing, which is like a kind of a counterintuitive truth, but it is true. So that's the first observation here. The second observation here is that if you look at how transparency has changed in organizations over the past 2 decades, it's only ever going in one direction. Transparency is increasing. And finance is not the only area where this happens. So I was an early investor in a company called Amplitude. It's an analytics platform. And people forget that before these tools where it lets you self-service data, you had to go through the data team. And this data was considered sensitive. But now we kind of take for granted that when you work at a company, you understand what the core metrics are supposed to be. You understand user growth. You understand retention. And the reason why is because it's useful. It's a competitive advantage for people to understand the state of the business so they can contribute to it. And as a result, it's made data more strategic, more important, and it's helped companies run better. Figma is a very similar example, actually. It's not just a better design tool. Before Figma, it was considered rude to look over the shoulder of a designer as they were working. But after Figma, whether you're a business leader or engineer or a PM, you're working together in Figma. It's made design better. And the same thing, there is no equivalent for the business itself. And if we can provide that, it is a strategic advantage for everyone in a company to have as much context as possible about the business. Now, the key is that's possible, right? Like you don't want necessarily everyone to see everything, which is why you need more controls than what a spreadsheet can give you in order to give people that context that isn't necessary to be competitive.
Yeah, that's really, really well said. Couldn't agree more. So I guess, how do you see Runway as something that is really aiming to make a spreadsheet obsolete, or is it aiming to supplement a spreadsheet, or is it really just you have cells, you have similar attributes to spreadsheets, but you really sort of humanize it. Is the goal to just create a better kind of spreadsheet, or how would you articulate your relationship to the spreadsheet?
I think the spreadsheet paradigm and spreadsheet products in Excel are like some of the best software products humans have ever made. Like, I deeply admire the product and its power and its flexibility. It's a product that can do anything. But products that can do anything don't do any specific thing the best. And so the way I would describe Runway's relationship with a spreadsheet is we unbundle important use cases from a spreadsheet. So if you're familiar with Airtable, a lot of people, it's a very easy to use platform. What Airtable has done is, if you think about what people use spreadsheets for, most of the use cases can be boiled down into 2 types of use cases. The first use case is using it as a database. Basically, you have a sheet with rows of things, rows of people, rows of customers, rows of leads, right? And that's one way of using a spreadsheet. The second big category of usage is time series simulation, January, February, March. And those 2 use cases basically cover like 99% of the use cases for a spreadsheet. And what Airtable has done is said, hey, if we make the foundational primitive, the abstraction, not a cell, but a row, we can make very common workflows a lot easier, a lot faster. We can build a very powerful product and platform on top of that. And so they unbundled basically to that database use case from Excel. And they built a very useful product for people and, of course, a very valuable business. And the way to think about what we're doing is we're unbundling the time series simulation use case from Excel too. And by unbundling it, we make very common use cases a lot faster, a lot easier. And we build abstractions on top too to do the same. In the same way that Airtable has made a lot of use cases a lot faster and better. And so that's the way we think about this. Because Excel doesn't do any specific thing well, there's an opportunity to unbundle specific use cases. And as it turns out, business planning is a very specific use case, right? Like fine grained sharing is just one of like 100 different details that is like very specific to this use case that a general purpose tool isn't fully designed to do.
Yeah. So you mentioned you have a B2C background. Talk about unlearning B2C to adapt to the expectations, and particularly of enterprise B2B customers. I know you've built a lot for early stage startups and you have had a lot of success there. But how are you focusing on the needs of enterprise customers, and what are the subtleties that you're building for that I assume are part of your growth roadmap? And what are the challenges in meeting those enterprise use cases for Runway at this current moment?
Yeah, with consumer, it's relatively easy to build something easy to use. The products tend to be a lot simpler. You can use a lot more of your own taste and instincts from the get go. And with business software, the details are so rich that you have to be so much closer to the customer. Um, and so that's probably the biggest thing that I had to learn is how do you learn from customers? Because the way you learn from customers is really different in B2B than in consumer. With consumer, you can just look at the data, you get something out there, get to some statistical significance and try different things. With enterprise, you have to like really understand the details of individual specific customers and then figure out what are the commonalities between these things such that you can build something that is not hard coded to any particular customer, that is flexible enough to address a bunch of different use cases and yet still easy to use. And integrating the consumer grade ease of use with the flexibility and details of the needs of the enterprise customer has been probably the biggest personal challenge of mine over the past couple of years in building Runway. But yeah, that took quite a while. But we are now in a better spot, having done the painful experience of growing what I was capable of doing with the team.
That's awesome. Well, let's get over to the subject that really I wanted to cover the most today. Really about the evolution or the emerging use cases of AI in financial services or business management, and the broader long term vision of Runway that this will relate to. Tell us about how AI is currently being leveraged with a platform like Runway, and then how you see Runway evolving into an AI driven platform over time.
Yeah. So, like everyone else, we AI is very core to what we do, but I think in a deeper way than just a buzzword where you are going to add a copilot chat thing to your product and say you have AI. The mission statement of our company is to make business accessible and understandable to everyone. And those two things, making things accessible and making things understandable, are two things that LLMs are very good at today. It can make things more accessible to people by enabling natural language interactions, and it makes things more understandable by being able to explain things in natural language, whatever you're looking at. And so our philosophy on AI is we don't want to just do a chat copilot, although we do that. The thing about chat is that you have to know what question to ask, and it doesn't do anything until you ask the question. But I think the real good use of AI is to embed it deeply into everything that you see in the product. So if you're looking at a formula, there should just be an English explanation of the formula right there. If you're looking at a model, there should be an English explanation of like what the model does. And so we have this other notion of pull requests, for example, inside the product where anyone can propose changes to the model and there's approval flow. AI could explain what changed, what this is proposing for you. We have snapshots. AI should explain how the snapshot from 6 months ago is different from the snapshot that you have today. So that's how you make it more understandable. And of course, in terms of accessibility, the way we think about, we really want to leverage what AI is good and not good at. And I'm pretty deep into the context of AI. I tweet quite a bit about it, and most of the people follow me on Twitter follow me for AI tweets. And The thing about LLMs is that it's surprisingly human in its strengths and limitations. It has some like a good amount of common sense reasoning and intuition. Like if you ask it, given a bunch of drivers, what is most likely to drive sales? And out of the list of drivers you give it, it will probably guess like hire more salespeople or changing conversion rate. And so what it's not good at though is the same thing that humans aren't good at. It's not good at doing math. It can't just like simulate in their head like how a driver move is gonna change the revenue growth trajectory 2 years from now. That's what you use Excel for as a human being. And so the way we think about how to best leverage AI is effectively Runway is a calculator. It's like this black box. And the LLM is sort of this assistant human brain. So you can ask it questions the same way you would ask an analyst, and you can make that faster. So if you ask an analyst a question of how do you triple revenue next year and not run out of money? What the analyst would do is go to the spreadsheet and move some levers and try some, what if we hire 20 people or 30 salespeople and see how that affects your revenue 2 years from now. And you're going to adjust the different levers until you get to roughly 3x against the baseline. That stuff can be automated today because you hand the LLM a calculator. And so that's how we think about using AI today. Is we have this calculator, we have this like intuition machine, and we can make some of the common questions that a CFO or CEO might ask just a lot faster. So that's where it starts.
Yeah.
But where it goes is you give the LLM as much context as possible so that they can ask and answer even better questions and help you ask better questions too. And be this like genius level assistant that has like all the context about a business and has some intuition about where it's going to help you run it better.
Yeah, so I guess that goes to my next question is in, maybe not the short term, but if we already have the capability of that type of scenario forecasting that can be automated based on the deepest data available to a company, it sounds like we're right on the path towards perhaps being able to automate some of the very, most rigorous aspects of a company that a CEO or a CFO or CIO might be overseeing. And do you see the true manifestation of an AI CEO or CFO being the future, or will there be a co-pilot type scenario? Obviously, we think that co-pilot is probably going to be more near term, but could those roles in the C-suite actually be autonomously taken over by AI at some point, in your view?
So yeah, now we're entering philosophical science fiction territory, but
It's the fun stuff.
You're totally right. In the short to midterm, it's really about building tools that help humans interact better and create better, whether that's software or businesses or a spreadsheet. And it's going to get better rapidly, and it's going to increase the leverage of everyone in the company, right? You won't need an analyst as a CFO. You can just like have an AI analyst to update your model for you and run scenarios for you. So that's going to be incredibly fun and beneficial for everyone. And that's what the next, let's say, 2 to 5 years looks like. But eventually, the capabilities of AI won't just increase leverage. And this is where I have maybe a controversial or contrarian opinion on where this is going. Because I think the popular belief is that it's going to be great. These tools are going to get better. And we're going to be able to use these tools to create better and better things. And that's true. The difference is it's not just a tool. It is actual intelligence. And at some point, these tools are going to get so good that it's able to do things on its own and ask questions on its own better than any human can. And so it could, within 5 to 10 years, run a company better than a human CEO could. or understand finances better than a human CFO could. But the world that we live in is just so unimaginably different when that happens, because if that's true of every job in the world.
Exactly. Yep.
Right? From an engineer to an artist to a movie director, right? Like, it will be a much better tool for you to be creative, but people forget that it can also just be more creative at that time. And the world that we live in is just so unimaginably different. It's hard to even speculate like what that's going to look like, but it is coming.
Yeah, it's a bold statement, but I mean, I don't see it any other way, really. I guess as it pertains to the C-suite, the art and the science of being in charge of a company. Obviously, you're a founder and CEO yourself. Can AI really be art and science? Can it really capture, as you said, the artistic subtleties of a visual artist or actor or photographer to the same degree that only the human touch can? And in the same vein, how can CEOs and founders like yourself look at it in a supportive and positive way versus just something that is going to come in and do their job better and replace them? Because obviously we don't want that dystopian view of AI. So what can you say just to that to make this look like a positive future?
I don't know what I can say. I mean, this is like very AGI philosophical territory, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think up until the moment where it gets better at the art and the science of everything that humans do, it is going to be purely a leverage increase for every role that we have.
Yeah.
So it's going to be positive, right? Everyone who has an idea, who wants to move faster, can use AI as this amazing tool to make their jobs easier, faster. And one person can do the job of 2, 10, 100, 1,000 people over the next 5 years. And that's going to be incredible for everyone. But then, yeah, your question about, can AI ever be as creative and artistic and soulful, for whatever that means, as a human being? And my answer is, of course it will. I think it's easy to think that maybe that won't happen, because if you look at what AI does today, it seems kind of generic sometimes when it answers questions, when it generates an image. Sometimes it has 6 fingers. You can point at all these things and say, it's not the same as a human. Like, it's not as good. But you forget what it was a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And you're not really taking into account what it's going to be a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. And yes, the way it's trained is based on a vast amount of data from humans, but that's not where it's going to end. We're going to put these things out in the world in the form of agents and even like embodied robots that are walking around. It's going to learn by interacting with the world and create more data the same way humans do. And so this idea that it's never going to get to a point where it's going to be more creative, more artistic than a human, I think is really naive. Like, it will. It's going to get way smarter than any human, and also way more creative and way more artistic and way more entertaining. It will get there. There is no way that it doesn't, frankly. And in that world, no one knows what that's going to look like, but it's going to happen.
Well, let's see. I mean, let's see. That's quite something to be sentient to in the coming years. I guess just to close things out, Siqi, this has been awesome. But just if you have anything you could share with our listeners in the world of commercial payments in which we operate, B2B payments, large payments across borders. You seeing any interesting other innovations out there? We've talked about how AI is helping to obviously get ahead of fraudsters, increase transparency, speed, and reducing sort of the manual reconciliation process that bogs down payments. Have we missed anything in this discussion in terms of what businesses can leverage now or in the near future, of course, besides Runway, to improve their global day-to-day biz ops that's exciting you out there?
Yeah, I think, the interesting opportunity AI does accelerating is how much people without engineering experience can build, particularly with no code tools. The thing about AI is like the way you get it to do things is you ask it nicely in very specific detail to do things. And you can hook up these prompts inside no code tools, whether that's a Zapier or some other tool. And so, inside Runway, for example, every lead that comes in is automatically qualified with GPT-4. And then we draft the outbound email automatically. We put it in someone's Gmail draft automatically. And all of this created with like zero engineering work. So I think the biggest thing that is underrated is just how much you can do now without having to be technical because AI exists that you couldn't do before, even a year or two ago. And it's worth developing an AI culture within any company. So, for example, holding an AI hackathon is really fun because people outside of engineering can participate too and build new tools to increase their own leverage.
All right, well, cool. I appreciate you sharing those thoughts, my friend, and thank you for coming on today. It was great to have you. I'll be watching Runway closely and rooting on your success, of course. And again, great to have you. Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me, Alex. I really enjoy this.
My pleasure.